You have 30 days to move out. My mother said it like she was offering me a cup of tea, calm, poised, and poisonous. She stood in the middle of my kitchen, drumming her manicured nails against the marble counter I had personally refinished. The same space where I had launched my bakery business, watched the sunrise with my grandmother, and mourned her when the end finally came. The morning light filtered in through the windows, casting soft shadows across the floor we had sanded together. Everything here, every tile, every cabinet, every memory was mine, and yet my mother stood there as if she owned it all. Beside her was my younger brother, Laz, his arm wrapped tightly around his pregnant wife, Calla, like this was some sweet family moment. Except it wasn't. It was an ambush. You're always traveling for your events anyway, Laz added, shrugging like it was no big deal. Calla needs a real home now with the baby coming. The baby, that was their new weapon, a convenient excuse to justify anything they wanted, from my childhood bedroom to now, apparently my entire apartment. Calla rested a hand on her barely there bump, saying nothing. She never did, just smiled, nodded, and let the Whitlocks bulldoze over anyone who dared resist. I took a slow sip of my coffee, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make them uncomfortable. I didn't flinch. I didn't shout. And for a brief second I saw it, just the flicker of uncertainty in my mother's eyes. She hadn't expected me to be calm. You thought selling my apartment was a good solution, I said softly, my voice steady. It's not technically yours, my mother replied, pulling out a folder thick with legal-looking documents. Your father and I kept our names on the deed for tax purposes. You knew that. We signed everything yesterday. Calla and Laz will take possession in 30 days. She smiled, sharp and triumphant. I didn't smile back. Instead, I looked past them, past the betrayal, the arrogance, the entitlement, and thought of the last conversation I had with my grandmother. It had been just weeks before she passed, her mind still razor-sharp despite her failing body. We had sat in this very kitchen, kneading dough, sunlight pooling on the counter like warm honey. They'll try to take it from you, she said, eyes locking with mine. Your mother never forgave me for giving you this place instead of her. But this is your home, Sable, and I made sure it stays that way. Keep the envelope safe. Tell no one until you have to. I took one last sip of my coffee and set the cup down slowly. I think, I said, we need to discuss something before we talk about me moving out. My mother arched a brow. If you're talking about that silly office you turned the guest room into, I've told you, no decent woman turns her spare room into a workspace. It's uncouth. I didn't respond. I simply turned and walked upstairs to the drawer where the envelope still waited. Exactly where I left it. They had no idea what was coming. The drawer in my upstairs office stuck for a moment, just like always. The old wood had swollen a bit in the summer heat, but the envelope inside slid out smooth and cool. Pale blue, worn at the corners. My name written in my grandmother's handwriting, still careful even near the end. I ran my fingers over the flap, remembering the weight of her words that afternoon. The way her voice dropped low like she was telling me a secret that could change everything. They won't stop Sable, she had whispered, eyes brighter than the afternoon sun outside. They'll smile while they take everything from you. But I've made sure they won't get far. You just need to hold the line. The apartment had never been in my parents' name. Not truly. On paper, maybe. For tax reasons, peacekeeping, appearances. But 3 years ago, my grandmother transferred the deed to me directly. This apartment and the building next door. Fully notarized. Witnessed. Filed away with Langford Miles, her trusted attorney. And a copy? Sealed in this envelope, along with the official transfer forms. She hadn't trusted anyone else with it. Only me. I walked downstairs slowly, deliberately, the envelope gripped firmly in one hand. I found them still standing in my kitchen, now growing impatient. My mother's eyes narrowed when she saw the folder in my hand. Worn at the edges, nothing like the crisp legal packet she had flaunted earlier. "What's that?" Calla asked, her voice small for the first time. "The real deed," I said simply, placing the papers on the counter, "and full proof of ownership for this apartment and the building next door." Verlaine leaned in, scanning the documents. I watched the color drain from her face with every line she read. 2 properties, transferred legally, signed and notarized by Henrietta Doyle. 3 years ago. This isn't valid," she sputtered, her voice brittle. "Oh, it's very valid," I said calmly. "Mr. Miles handled everything personally. You remember him, don't you? He was grandmother's attorney for 30 years. He made sure there were no ambiguities." Calla sat down slowly, like her legs could no longer hold her weight. Laz reached for the papers, flipping through with growing panic. "You knew? You knew we were planning the sale." "I found out weeks ago," I replied, meeting his eyes without flinching. "I could have stopped you then, but grandmother always said, 'Let people show their true colors.' And oh, how they had! My mother didn't say anything at first. She stared at the papers like they might morph if she willed them hard enough. Then, finally, she spoke. 'You should have told us.' I raised an eyebrow. 'Like you told me you were selling my home.'" Her lips pressed together, her jaw tight with fury or maybe shame. I couldn't tell anymore. "You don't understand," she hissed. "This was supposed to be my home," I cut in, "where I lived for 10 years. Where I cared for grandmother while you were conveniently vacationing in Napa. Where I started my business when no one else believed in me." The kitchen fell silent. Laz looked like he wanted to disappear. Calla's gaze was locked on the counter, her hand resting protectively over her stomach. They weren't used to being challenged. They certainly weren't used to losing. And for once, they had nothing to say. It was 2 days later when I heard the knock at my kitchen door. Soft, hesitant, almost like the person on the other side wasn't sure they had the right to be there. I wiped flour from my hands. I'd been elbow deep in pie dough for an upcoming wedding order, and opened the door to find Calla standing there alone, cradling a white paper bag from Morning Finch Bakery. Her hair was pulled back in a loose bun, face bare, shoulders slightly hunched in her beige maternity cardigan. She looked smaller without Laz or my mother flanking her. "I brought peace offerings," she said, quietly holding out the bag. I stepped aside and gestured to the stool near the prep counter. "Those better be their lemon tarts." Calla gave a half smile and reached into the bag. 2 lemon tarts, 1 almond croissant, and chocolate chip scones. "I remember you stress ate those during wedding season last year." I placed the bag on the counter, but didn't touch it. "So, what brings you here, Calla?" She exhaled, slowly, like she'd been holding her breath for months. "I didn't know," she said, her voice soft but steady, "about the deed, about any of it. Laz told me your parents were giving us the apartment as a baby gift. I never thought they were taking it from you." "You never asked," I replied, not unkindly. She nodded, shame washing across her face. "I should have. I wanted to believe it was simple, that someone was doing something kind for us. But it wasn't kindness, was it?" "No," I said. "It was theft wrapped in a baby shower bow." Calla winced, but didn't defend them. That at least was something. I studied her for a long moment. For years ago, when she married Laz, she was bright-eyed, full of plans to keep teaching, to travel, to live with intention. But slowly I had watched her be reshaped by the Whitlock family machine. Proper wives don't need careers. Appearance is everything. Let Laz lead. Now, sitting across from me with lemon tarts and regret, I saw a different kind of woman. I meant what I said the other day. I told her, reaching for a clean plate. "The 3rd-floor unit in the building next door just opened up. It needs a little work, but it has good bones. Same layout as this one. If you and Laz need a place, I'm willing to rent it to you." Calla blinked. "Even after what I tried to do?" "On one condition," I said firmly. This stays between us. No backroom talks with my mother. No running to Laz every time a decision needs to be made. If you rent from me, it's a business arrangement. Professional. Respectful. She nodded slowly, her fingers tightening around the edge of the counter. Laz, he won't like that. He thinks family shouldn't have to pay rent. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. And how's that been working out for him so far? Calla let out a laugh, small, honest, surprised. We sat in silence for a moment, the kitchen filled with the warm scent of cinnamon and browned butter. Can I see it? She asked finally. The apartment next door? I grabbed my keys. No time like the present. The building next door was a mirror of mine. Same wrought iron railings, same vintage brass doorknobs polished by decades of turning hands. My grandmother used to call it the twin, though the two buildings had always carried very different energies. Hers was quiet strength. Theirs was entitlement wrapped in ivy and cracked brick. We climbed the old staircase to the third floor, the wood creaking underfoot. At the top, I unlocked the door and pushed it open. Calla stepped inside and froze. The apartment was empty, truly empty. Bare walls, scuffed hardwood floors, a yellowed refrigerator humming softly in the corner. But sunlight poured through the windows like liquid gold, catching the dust in the air and making the whole space feel suspended in time. It's beautiful, she whispered, walking slowly toward the window. Her fingers brushed the original crown molding, as if afraid it might vanish. It needs work, I said, stepping inside behind her. I was planning a full renovation. Updated kitchen, refinished floors. Maybe open up the archway between the living room and dining area. But I could hold off if you're interested in having some say in the finishes. Calla turned, her eyes wide. Really? I nodded. You'd be the tenant. You should get to choose what it looks like. She looked around the space again, slower this time, taking it in not just as a possibility, but as something that could be hers. Not handed down, not stolen, not orchestrated behind closed doors. A home she could shape. Her eyes shimmered slightly. Why are you being so generous? After everything. I leaned against the doorframe. Because you're the only one who apologized. And because I think maybe you're ready to stop letting them make your choices for you. That struck something in her. I saw her shoulders shift, spine straighten just a little. Then both our phones buzzed at once. The family group chat. I had muted it days ago, but Calla read it aloud with a grimace. Emergency family meeting. Sunday. Attendance required. Your father and I have made some decisions about the future of both buildings. She looked at me, panic flaring in her eyes. What are they planning? I deleted the message without even opening it. Nothing that matters, I said simply. They don't own these buildings, remember? Let them plan all they want. Calla hesitated. Laz will expect me to go. They'll expect us to present a united front against you. I met her gaze. And what do you want? She looked back at the apartment, at the way the sunlight hit the old floorboards, at the empty walls that could one day hold family photos, dried flower wreaths, baby handprints. I want to make my own decision, she said finally. I want my baby to grow up in a home that's really ours, even if we're renting it, not something taken from someone else. I reached into my bag, pulled out a notepad. I can have renovation plans ready by next week. Standard lease. Market rent. First month free while the work is done. But Calla, this has to be your decision. Not Laz's. Not my mother's. Yours. She inhaled, slowly, deeply, then nodded. I'd like to see those plans. As we walked back down the stairs, I realized something had shifted. Not just in Calla, but in the entire foundation of our family dynamic. Maybe this wasn't just about protecting what was mine anymore. Maybe it was about helping someone else learn how to claim what should have been theirs all along. Sunday arrived with that crisp autumn air my grandmother used to love, the kind that made you want to bake something warm and sweet. I pulled into my parents' driveway at exactly 2 p.m., the way I used to arrive for holidays before I stopped pretending they were about family. The house hadn't changed. White shutters, stone walkway, seasonal wreath on the door. A false sense of welcome. Inside, the tension was sharp enough to cut through. My mother sat like a queen in her high-backed armchair, dressed in navy like she was preparing for a courtroom, not a living room. My father stood behind her with a legal folder tucked under one arm. Laz paced by the window, jaw clenched. Aunts and uncles filled the side chairs, leaning in, murmuring. Calla sat near the end of the couch, apart from the rest, and when I walked in, she met my eyes with something quiet and steady. "Sable," my mother said, her voice clipped. "So glad you decided to join us." "I wouldn't miss it," I replied, remaining standing. "Though I'm curious what exactly we're all here to discuss, since the matter of ownership is legally settled." My father stepped forward, opening the folder with deliberate drama. "We've been reviewing the circumstances of your grandmother's decisions. Our lawyer has concerns about her mental state in her final months." My jaw didn't tighten. My voice didn't waver. "The same final months I spent taking care of her?" I asked. "While you were in Tuscany, while Laz was pitching crypto scams to college kids." She was confused. Laz snapped. "You manipulated her, turned her against us." Before I could respond, Calla stood up. Every head turned. "No, she didn't," she said. "I was there sometimes. I saw Henrietta. She wasn't confused. She knew exactly what she wanted." Laz stared at her. "Sit down." "No," Calla said, stepping beside me. "You're trying to steal a home. You're using our baby as leverage. I won't be part of it." My mother's voice sharpened like glass. "Calla, you're pregnant. You're emotional." "Don't," Calla cut her off. "Don't try to dismiss me. You made this mess. All Sable did was protect what was already hers." I took a deep breath, then pulled my phone from my pocket. "Before this charade continues, there's something you should all see." I tapped the screen, and my grandmother's face filled the TV in the corner of the room. Her voice was clear, strong. "I'm recording this because I know my daughter. She never forgave me for choosing Sable. But this building isn't about inheritance. It's about stewardship. Sable has built something real, something that deserves to continue." The video showed her signing the deed, Mr. Langford Miles confirming every document, her date of evaluation, her mental competency. When it ended, no one spoke, not for a full 30 seconds. Then I said, quietly, "There's more. Medical files, witness statements, years of records. How far do you want to take this?" My father closed his folder. My mother looked pale and older than I had ever seen her. But it was Laz who broke the silence. "You knew," he whispered, turning to Calla. "You knew about the apartment next door." "Yes," she said, "and I agreed to rent it, at market rate, because that's what adults do when they respect boundaries." I reached into my bag and pulled out the renovation packet. "The plans are ready, if you're still interested." Calla looked at the pages, then back at me. "We are." My mother stood abruptly. "I think you should all leave. We need time to process this." "Take all the time you need," I said. "But nothing is changing. This is done." As we walked toward the door, Calla brushed my arm. Then, loudly enough for the entire room to hear, she said, "I'd like to see those renovation plans for our new home." The door shut behind us like the closing of a chapter, and for the first time in years, I felt free. 6 months later, I stood in the newly renovated third-floor apartment of the building next door, watching Calla arrange fresh flowers in a blue ceramic vase. Her baby bump was pronounced now, stretching the soft cotton of her dress. The nursery down the hall was ready, painted in soft greens and creams, with hand-sewn curtains made by Maria, one of my tenants who ran the alterations shop downstairs. This place doesn't even feel like the same apartment, Calla said, tucking a sprig of lavender into the bouquet. The marble countertops were worth every penny. She smiled at me, a real smile this time. Not the kind that seeks approval, but the kind that simply is. Calla had found herself again. Slowly, then all at once. She'd started a small flower business out of their kitchen. Bouquets for my catering events, arrangements for local bakeries and art shows. She named it Calla and Clay, soft and grounded, just like her. Though James is still adjusting to paying rent, she said with a grin, not looking up from the vase. I raised an eyebrow. He's lucky I didn't charge him for emotional damages. She laughed. Since the confrontation, things had shifted. Not overnight, not dramatically, but deeply. James, faced with the very real possibility of losing both his wife and his last fallback plan, had taken a consulting job with a startup in Atlanta. He commuted. He learned how to cook pasta without Googling it. And, according to Calla, he finally understood the difference between helping and hovering. My parents, predictably, tried every tactic in their playbook. The silent treatment, the guilt texts, a few melodramatic voicemails from my father about betrayal and public humiliation. I didn't respond to most of them, but the turning point came during the holidays. My mother showed up at my door, older than I remembered her, and uncharacteristically quiet. I've been thinking about what your grandmother said, she told me, avoiding my eyes, about building something real, about stewardship. She paused, took a breath. I never built anything, Sable. I just expected things to be given to me. I didn't say anything. Not then. But I didn't close the door either. Now, in Calla's kitchen, the scent of lilies and cinnamon braided through the air. Outside, the sidewalks bustled, Mr. Chin arranging books in his store window, Maria setting out her sewing samples, a new tenant prepping a corner space for a bakery expansion. This was the community my grandmother had dreamed of, a place not just inherited, but earned, shaped, nurtured. She RSVP'd, Calla said, reading my expression. Who? Your mother. For the baby shower. She wants to bring her lemon squares. I blinked. The famous lemon squares she's refused to share the recipe for since 1992. She offered to teach me, Calla said. Baby steps, right? I nodded. Baby steps. My phone buzzed, a message from my property manager. One of our longtime tenants needed minor plumbing work. Nothing urgent, just the regular rhythms of real ownership. Miss Whitlock, a voice called from the hall. It was Maria, holding a tray of fresh empanadas. I brought snacks, and the nursery curtains are done. I smiled and stepped aside to let her in. As Maria and Calla chatted about fabric choices, I quietly returned to my apartment across the alley. I stepped into my office and opened the bottom drawer of my desk. Grandmother's final letter was still there, a little more worn now, but the ink had held. Property is more than bricks and mortar, Sable. It's about creating spaces where people can grow, where communities can thrive. You understand that in a way your mother never did. And she had been right. I closed the drawer, looked out the window at the buildings standing tall under the golden light, and felt, for the first time in years, that we weren't just surviving anymore. We were building something better. The morning of the baby shower arrived wrapped in soft sunlight and the scent of fresh cinnamon rolls from the bakery downstairs. Through the windows, I watched the sidewalks come alive. Kids on scooters, dogs tugging their owners toward the park, shopkeepers sweeping their stoops like it was a ritual of welcome. Inside, my apartment was filled with quiet hums of preparation. I set out pastries and started the coffee. Maria had already arrived, placing homemade empanadas on a warming tray and fluffing the nursery curtains one last time. Mr. Chen brought a tin of special jasmine tea he swore could ease any family tension. We'd see. Then came the knock I'd both expected and dreaded. I opened the door to find my mother standing there, holding a covered tray. Her hands trembled slightly, and her eyes flickered over my shoulder, like she wasn't sure she was really allowed in. "I brought the lemon squares," she said, "and the recipe, if you still want it." I stepped aside. "Come in." She looked around like she was seeing the apartment for the first time. Like maybe, just maybe, she understood the gravity of what it meant to lose something, and the quiet grace it took to build it back. Calla arrived shortly after, glowing in a soft blue dress that hugged her baby bump. She was calm, grounded. There was no performance today, just joy. She'd spent the week arranging handmade name cards, baking tiny lavender shortbreads, and designing a bouquet centerpiece that looked like it belonged in a magazine. She greeted my mother with a polite nod, then turned to me. "I invited some of grandmother's friends," she said. "They keep asking about you, you know. Said they're proud of how you handled everything." I didn't expect the lump in my throat, but it came anyway. By midday, the apartment was full of warmth, of stories, of people who knew how to give instead of take. Laughter spilled from the kitchen, where Maria and Mr. Chen were arguing about whether empanadas or steamed buns made better party snacks. In the living room, neighbors passed around framed photos of grandmother in her gardening hat, dirt on her cheeks and fire in her eyes. And me? I stood in the middle of it all, not as the victim of betrayal, but as the host of something new, something real. Not once during the afternoon did my parents mention property or paperwork. Not once did they try to reassert control. My mother offered to help fold gift wrap, and even laughed, soft and brittle but genuine, when the baby kicked mid-toast and made her drop a teacup. After the last guest left and the sun began to lower, casting amber shadows across the floorboards, Calla lingered near the window. "You know," she said, "I used to think legacy was about what gets passed down." I looked over, waiting. "But now I think it's more about what you build and who you build it with." I smiled. Grandmother would have liked that. We stood in silence for a moment, watching the lights flicker on in the building next door. Inside, I could see families eating dinner, shop signs glowing warm, the familiar outline of Maria's sewing machine whirring even after sunset. I pulled out my phone and opened our group chat. Just me, Calla, and Maria. "Breakfast before the chaos tomorrow?" "I'm making coffee." Their responses came fast and full of heart. Back in my kitchen, I poured one last cup of tea and stood by the window. The city buzzed below, but up here there was peace. This was home. Not just the apartment, not just the deed, but the life we had chosen to build, free from manipulation, grounded in purpose. My grandmother once said the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about growing something better in the ashes of what they tried to destroy. And that's exactly what we did.